At the turn of the 20th century, Ireland was a country in quiet transition. While the larger political movements often captured the headlines, the real story lay in the lives of ordinary people, those who lived and worked in the towns, villages, and fields scattered across the island. Their days were shaped not by speeches or revolutions, but by the weather, the land, and the steady rhythm of survival. Most people still lived in rural areas. Families worked small plots of land, often recently purchased through the land reforms of the previous decades. For generations, their ancestors had paid rent to absentee landlords, but by 1900, more and more farmers were becoming owners of the land they worked. It brought a sense of pride, of security, but not always prosperity. The land was often stony and poor, especially in the West, and every crop, every animal, required hard labor. Men rose early, worked until dusk, and even then, the rewards were modest. Women played an equal part, feeding animals, planting vegetables, baking bread, raising children. Children themselves were drawn in early, leaving school young to help with farm work or chores. In the towns, life was different, but no easier. Families lived in tight quarters, small terraced houses or crowded tenements. Streets bustled with carts, vendors, and the noise of daily trade. Men worked in local industries, on the railways, in factories, or as casual labourers. Women found employment as seamstresses, laundry workers, or more often, as domestic servants in wealthier households. Their days were long and tiring, with little protection or pay. Still, there was a sense of order, of shared struggle. People leaned on each other. A neighbour might help care for a child, share a fire, or offer a bit of food in lean times. Education was improving, but uneven. National schools had spread through the countryside, and literacy rates were rising. But education often came second to survival. A boy might learn his letters only to leave at 12 or 13, needed on the farm. A girl might be pulled from school to help raise siblings or take a job in town. For many families, the dream of a better life rested not in the classroom, but across the ocean. Emigration was part of almost every Irish life. A brother in Boston, a sister in Liverpool, an uncle in New York. The departures were painful. A suitcase packed with care, a last mass, a long walk to the train station, tears held back as long as possible. Those who left sent money home, small amounts, often scraped together, but enough to keep the farm afloat or help a younger sibling stay in school. Their letters were cherished, read aloud at the hearth, passed from hand to hand. Their photographs were framed and kept in pride of place, silent reminders of distance and connection. For women, life was shaped by tradition and expectation. In the countryside, daughters were often expected to remain at home until marriage, or sometimes never marry at all, especially if a brother inherited the land. A woman's role was centered on the home, but it was far from idle. She kept the house running, tended animals, baked, sewed, prayed, taught her children. In towns, girls might find work in shops or as servants, but their freedom was still narrow. Even so, women were keepers of culture, of language, song, and story. In many homes, it was the mother or grandmother who preserved local tales, passed down Irish prayers, and kept the customs alive. Religion was the steady background to everyday life. In Catholic households, the day might begin with a morning prayer and end with the rosary. The Sacred Heart hung above the door, holy water stood near the bed. People turned to their priests for guidance, for comfort, sometimes for judgment. In Protestant areas, especially in Ulster, church life also played a central role, offering structure, discipline, and community. Though religious tensions existed, for most people, faith was less about conflict and more about certainty, a way to make sense of the world, to endure hardship, to belong. Work was often insecure. A bad harvest, an illness, a factory layoff, any of these could push a family toward hunger. There was no social safety net, no guaranteed wage. People relied on one another. Shared labor during harvests. Neighbors bringing food during times of sickness. Women organizing parish events to raise funds for the needy. It was a culture of mutual aid, born not from charity but from necessity. Yet for all the hardship, there was richness. In the evenings, families gathered around the fire. Stories were told, some handed down for generations, others made up on the spot. Songs were sung, fiddles played, dances held at crossroads. The Gaelic revival was beginning to stir, and in some areas, the Irish language was still spoken in daily life. Even in English-speaking towns, people carried Irish expressions, phrases, a turn of phrase that spoke of older times. Culture wasn't something separate from life, it was life. Sports brought people together, too. The growing popularity of Gaelic games like hurling and football gave towns and parishes something to cheer for. Matches weren't just entertainment, they were expressions of pride, of identity. Teams represented more than skill, they stood for community, for heritage, for the idea that Ireland had its own ways, its own heart. In all of this, the farming, the work, the emigration, the traditions, the thread that ties it together is resilience. The people of Ireland at the dawn of the 20th century were not wealthy, and many were not free in the ways we might imagine today. But they endured. They adapted. They made lives out of what they had, held on to hope, and passed that spirit on to the next generation. And while the headlines would be filled with politics and power struggles in the years to come, the true story of Ireland's transformation began here, in the quiet courage of everyday people.